All right, want to grow your business, diversify your content? You're not going to find a better tool out there than Melon for your live streaming needs. Blazing fast response time, low CPU usage, all available right in your browser. Go to melonapp.com/wolf and start streaming today. Hey, Jordan Belfort here, the Wolf of Wall Street in the Wolf's Den. Got a great podcast for you about the real estate industry. Got a really interesting guest on. He's just landed his own TV show on A&E. He's making a lot of money in the whole flipping, wholesaling, rehabbing, Airbnb, and he's a particularly good guest. He's got a lot of really concise answers. We go through economics. We go through, most importantly, what holds people back from taking advantage of this opportunity. I have a lot of guests on my show that are in this field. It seems like a pretty, I wouldn't say surefire, but a very, relatively easy way to make at least, $500,000, $1 million a year. And there's people who are struggling right now financially, yet they're not embracing this concept. Why? What is it about this real estate flipping, wholesaling business that either is making people too skeptical to give it a shot, or has them lacking in their own self-belief that they think it makes sense to do all the work required to get into this, because there's some work required, so they don't take action. That's what this podcast is about. And also, it's a step-by-step analysis of the industry and shows you how to get into it. So it's really worth listening, whether it's going to be your primary source, just a secondary source of income. Everyone needs to know this stuff, so it's pretty cool. All right? So we're going to meet my guest in a second. He's a cool guy. His name is Pace Morby. And first, we're going to hear from our sponsors, and then you'll hear from Pace and I. Hey, JB here. I've got some super exciting news about the Wolf Network, which has moved to our new site. Go to www.wolf.online. That's the new site, www.wolf.online. If you're not a member yet, well, don't wait. Sign up right now and live the life you deserve. That's what you're going to get from this. www.wolf.online. All right, so we got Pace Morby here. What's up, my friend? How are you? Okay, so how would you describe yourself in terms of, as a businessman? You do a lot of things. You're engaged in fixing and flipping. You have your own TV show coming out. You're in the finance world in terms of helping people figure out ways to buy houses, right? So how would you overall describe yourself?
Really simple. I would say it starts with REI, so real estate investing. And then from that point, REI now doesn't stand for real estate investing. Once you get into real estate, you have all these other opportunities, right? Real estate investing is the acronym, but then it goes into replace expenses with income. So for example, I'm doing fix and flips, I'm doing wholesale, I'm doing whatever, and I utilize a title company to do that.
Right.
So why don't I go in and take over a title company? Now I own a title company, right? Transaction coordinating. Why don't I start a transaction coordination business? Hard money lending business. Anything that costs me money, I replace that expense with income by building a business around that.
Got it. So you're a big believer in vertical integration.
100%. I mean, you know this. You start talking about one thing in your life, the other things all rise, right? And so I'm not a guy creating rocket ships and then going off and selling shoelaces. I'm a guy selling real estate related products. So when I talk about one, the other ones all rise.
Right. So as a rule, do you think that you should always vertically integrate, or there are certain things, because let's forget real estate for a second. So vertical integration applies to any industry, right?
Right.
And major players, enterprises like Ford Motor, really perfect this, in General Motors, right back in the day, they go through these phases where they go like into full vertical integration, where they like want to buy every single part of the supply chain. And then they start to go through these other phases. They start saying, wait a second, doing that isn't exactly as effective as we thought. And they will start selling things off or outsourcing. So do you have any sort of like hard and fast rule for yourself in your business? Like, when do I want to vertically integrate and when do I want to continue outsourcing the solution?
Yes. Whenever it requires me to hire more people, I try and stay away from it. Because in business, you know this really, really well. You hire people, you now have a babysitting job. Right. So like you look at a Subway franchise, not to demean anybody that owns a franchise for Subway, but that ultimately becomes a babysitting job, right? You've got teenagers you're managing rather than selling sandwiches. And so it's the same thing in real estate. If I have to go out and hire a big old staff to start a new business, I'm not excited about that. Whereas taking over a title company, here, I'll give you a good example. If I'm doing 20, 30 transactions in the state, what I'd rather do instead of hiring a transaction or a title company to do my work, I go to them and say, why don't we partner? Not only will I bring you my files, but I'll tell all my friends that they should bring their files here too. So I can go in and become an owner of a title company with literally $0 out of my pocket just by leveraging what I already have. So you got to look at these opportunities and say, can I leverage what I'm doing right now to work my way into a situation that doesn't require me to have any personnel to be hired, managed, onboarded, all that kind of stuff.
So for anyone that's listening, doesn't know what we're talking about, I should have really qualified. So vertical integration is a term they use in economics. That means you try to go back into the supply chain or the transaction and capture a greater portion of the value chain. So if like you're an automotive company, right? That means you want to actually go and buy at the highest level, going back and buying the iron ore mine, that then the smelter that smelts the iron, the person that makes it into steel, hire a shipping company that boats it over to you, and then hire local fabricators that make it into the properly sized steel plates, all the way down to the assembly line. That will be pure vertical integration versus having people that you don't essentially own their companies, but you have contracts to just buy finished goods, right? And there's pros and cons to both. As opposed to vertical, there's something called horizontal integration, and that's more like where one company buys up other companies that have similar brands within the same industry. So Lincoln Mercury Ford. So there's like it's all different brands within that same umbrella. So there's economies of scale there, right? So
super smart, yeah. And to bring it back to the basics of real estate and sales, for example. So real estate, how do you get a deal? You get a deal by talking to a motivated seller, getting that seller, solving their problems, kind of the pen conversation. Sure. Sell me this pen. Right. At the end of the day, what you're really saying is that really even a good pen for me? Right. And you start asking questions. So once you understand you can help a seller, you convert that seller into a contract, you either wholesale it, you fix and flip it, or you buy and hold it. One of those three things. Now, how did I get a hold of that seller in the first place? Well, I hired a virtual assistant in the Philippines to call them. So if I'm doing a lot of transactions, the smartest thing for me to do is go, I want to control that cold call. And so you go build a cold call center in the Philippines, and now you've got an army of people making the calls for you. And now instead of that being an expense in my business, now I have 500 of those cold callers calling for other wholesalers all over the country. Got it. Right?
Let me ask you a different question here. So it would seem there's a lot of people involved in this whole, real estate flipping and like sort of the overarching principle is that it's a really easy way to get rich. You'll make a lot of money. So it attracts a lot of people. There's a lot of business opportunities out there. I have a lot of friends that do really well in it. So
you got some of the highest level friends in this industry.
Right? So I get it. But here's the question though. Why is it that people who are struggling financially, who don't know what they want to do, may have lost their job in the pandemic, why aren't more people flocking into this?
Greatest question. I'm in Tampa 2 weeks ago. I'm taking an Uber from one location to another. The Uber driver says, what do you do? And it's hard to explain what you do when you have multiple businesses. So I'm in real estate, right? And he says to me, he goes, man, I just picked you up in this really nice location. You got to make 65 grand a year to live in this area. I'm like, man, talk about mindset, thinking $65,000 is a tremendous amount of money. So I said, well, what do you want to do? He goes, I don't know. I have no idea what I want to do. So I talked about real estate for 3 minutes. And he goes, man, why didn't I know about this? I go, bro, it's everywhere. Go to anybody's YouTube channel. They're talking about it. It's there. I don't know. I mean, it's just like this podcast. You get millions of views on this podcast and on your YouTube channel, but why don't you get billions? I don't know. How do you get it out to the masses so everybody hears it?
Is there something, let me ask you this question. Can anybody get into this who's motivated and succeed?
1,000%. And it sounds cliche because when I was a contractor, built homes for 10 years. I looked at the guys that I did projects for and I'm like, I can't do this. I can't do it. And then something happened to me that forced me to do it. And I'm like, holy shit, why wasn't I doing this the whole time?
So why would someone, I want to stay with this because I think it's really interesting.
I think it's the most important thing that your audience could know. Right. Honestly.
Because I have people personal in my life to me,
Right.
that are very important to me, that are looking for a career, right? And they're young, and they don't want me to help them directly because whatever, they're in the family, right?
Right. I was just going to say it's got to be a family
And,
member.
I recommended to them that they should go out, and I said I have a lot of friends making money, and I gave them some leads in the area, but they never followed through. Now I wonder, like, from your perspective, being in it, what is it that stops a person from following through? I don't want to mean like in inner game stuff. I'm talking about, like, is there some part of this? Like, let's go through what are the different steps to flip a house. I mean, I could figure them out pretty quickly, but I want you to say, what are like the 5 steps to succeeding in flipping houses?
Okay, so I'll answer your first question.
And is that the
real
right
quick.
term to say flipping houses, or is there a better way?
Because you can flip a house different ways, right?
All
You
right.
can flip the contract and wholesale it. You can flip the contract and put it on the MLS. You can flip it
So
however.
flipping's a good term.
Yeah, it's
Great.
great.
So what are the 5 steps to successfully flipping?
Okay, so first and foremost, the number one reason why people have a hard time getting into this business is for one reason. And the reason is that there are so many different ways to succeed that they get analysis paralysis, right? It's like you've got buddies that are like top realtors in the country.
Right.
Meanwhile, I would never get my real estate license, right? So when you get somebody like, let's say it's a nephew or somebody that looks at these 2 avatars and goes, this guy's got his license, this guy would never get his license, it confuses people.
Got it.
Okay, so that's number one. Now the 5 steps. Number 1, first step, find a seller. That's it. It's like when you were selling meat door to door.
Right.
You got to go to a door.
Right.
Right? You got to go to the door. So for us, the magic thing is that there's software available that will tell you exactly where these houses are.
Okay.
Okay, so
it scrapes the whole
Oh
whatever
my
listings
gosh.
are, tax rolls.
There's-
anyone who might be in trouble and somebody distressed seller. It locates potentially distressed sellers.
right. So I'll give you a really specific example for people that are brand new. So a really good app that we use, there's one called Batch Driven. Okay, so it batches all the houses together and you go drive and you stop by these houses. The app then has the seller's phone number, when they bought the house, how much they owe, what their daughter's name is, what they had for breakfast yesterday. The data in this day and age is insane. It's insane.
Right.
So that's step 1. Go download Batch Driven. I don't have an affiliate for it, but Batch Driven is a really, really good product.
Okay.
Okay. Now what it'll do, it's like Pokemon Go for real estate. Open up your app, and all of a sudden it's telling you where all the distressed sellers are.
Okay.
Jordan, I'm telling you, it's that easy.
Great.
Okay.
Step 1. So now you
Step
have
one.
Potential pools. Step
So
1.
the app will tell you, or there's other apps too, who's in foreclosure, who's underwater, who's behind on their payments, who's getting a divorce. All of, even vacant homes. It'll tell you all of that stuff, and it'll have different color codes per house.
Got it.
Now what do you do, right? So think about this. This is like going back to your days of selling meat. So if you had an app that said, these guys have empty refrigerators,
Right. That'll be a good thing. Yeah.
bro, think about that. You wouldn't have had to knock all those doors.
Right.
Meanwhile, you're cold calling and doing all this stuff. Technology has advanced that so much that instead of you knocking 10 doors in a row, you knock the one that you know has an empty freezer. That's it. That's how easy this has become.
Okay. So that's step 1. Step 2.
Step 1 is identify how you can solve the seller's problem.
Okay.
Okay. So if they're on this map, they have a problem. Empty freezer is the equivalent of it, but a problem could be I'm behind on my payments. I lost my job. I got a divorce. There's literally 50 plus reasons why a seller needs you.
Okay.
Okay. And people ask all the time, and I'll get to steps 3, 4, and 5. People will ask all the time, why would a seller sell to you at a discount? Well, because they're in a painful situation, right? They can't make their payments. They need whatever remaining equity of their house, whatever. Okay. So what I love, and I'll get into some of the things that I do. So step 1, find the distress. Step 2, find out how you can help that seller, whether it's, I have a seller, for example, in Arizona. She loses her job, COVID. She's a school teacher.
Right.
She doesn't get her pension, and she's struggling to make her payments.
Okay.
Her son in Indiana says, hey, Mom, if you can sell your house, you can come and nanny for me and the kids. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'll go work for my son. This will be great. I'll be, connected with my family. She had no equity in her house. So if she tries to sell her house for $300, but she owes $290, is she going to make any money in her pocket?
Right.
Hell no.
Right.
Right. So figuring out that problem is step number 2.
Okay.
Okay. Number 3 is now what category of real estate tactic do you utilize?
Stop 1 second. So
Yeah.
how many different types of problems are that are the ones that you can see every day and solve?
You can write a book on the same 50.
Okay, got
It's
it.
the same 50
So there's
over and
50
over and over.
potential scenarios.
Right.
And how many of those are solvable? Are they all solvable, or what percentage is solvable?
They're 100% solvable.
Okay, so there's 50 things. So there's sort of these 50 strategies. You plug in the this, that, boom, that's the strategy, get them out, right?
They're 100% solvable, and here's how. So you talk to a lot of wholesalers. You've had a ton of great wholesalers on this podcast.
Right.
Like I said, I'm a big fan. The wholesalers can't solve all those problems. Okay, because a wholesaler looks at a $300,000 house, and what do they say if somebody doesn't have equity? They can't do anything with that. There's no skin on the bone
Unless
for
the bank
them.
will take a short sale, in which case they probably go to court and forfeiture, right?
Right, and even in a short sale situation, the wholesaler is going to have a hard time buying it themselves because now there's regulation involved with you buying a short sale that you're involved in. There's a lot of people that went to prison over it. It's a crazy situation.
Why? Because they make promises to the people and stuff.
No,
inside
because
deals, or what?
essentially what they're doing is they're going to the bank and they're defrauding the bank and saying, hey, I have a buyer at 200. It's the highest offer I got. Meanwhile, they're the only buyer that they even represented, right? They never sent it out to anybody else.
Sure.
And so they were keeping it in-house and not actually
Okay.
you know what I'm saying?
So you'd have to disclose that to the bank. Say, I'm the only buyer, it's me. And then if the bank did it, you'd be off the hook, right?
Right. So now you identify the problem and you identify, does the seller have equity? If the seller has equity, typically what you're going to do is you're going to take that and you're going to wholesale it to a fix and flipper. That's if you're brand new. If you're brand new, wholesale is probably the easiest way because you don't have to do B, which is fix and flip it yourself.
And how much was the mark on the tip? What's the typical price house? 150.
So
200?
in Phoenix, Arizona, which is where I primarily invest, most of the stuff I invest outside of the state are buy and holds. But Arizona, the average purchase price is about $300,000.
Okay, and if you're gonna purchase it at 300, you're gonna want to wholesale it back out at.
Well, if the house is worth 300 after it's renovated and all that kind of stuff, that means you got to buy that at like 180 to 210.
So the house is actually worth 300 on the way out.
Right.
That means you have to buy it about 180. So then you mark it up to what?
Maybe 200.
So you make 20,000 and give it to the fix and flipper.
You're done. You're in and out. Your name's not even on the HUD. Like it's that simple. You're not even involved in the transaction. You just get a check at title.
And how easy is it? And I guess easy is probably wrong. So, like, in other words, I would assume it's a pretty competitive market, right?
Anywhere that you can make $20,000 per house with no credit,
Right.
Very little money into the game. It's ultra competitive.
But is it possible for a new person to break into it?
Incredibly possible.
Okay, great.
Incredibly possible.
So
So
so you said it's like 100%. So I mean, like anyone that really tries eventually can break into it, right?
yeah, 100%. I mean, some of the guys in the industry that have been around for a long time, I interview them all the time, and it took them 2-3 months to get their first deal, but boom, you get a $20,000 deal. And now that paradigm shifts where you're like, this is possible. I can truly do this. And everything changes. Now it's like contract per week, right? It's just like you selling meat. The first time you sold meat, you're like, holy shit, I can do this.
Sure.
Boom, paradigm shifts, you go crush it, right?
Got it.
So now let's say that I've got to buy that house at $200,000.
Right.
Okay. What if the seller owes $290 on their mortgage? Mm-hmm. Can a wholesaler solve that seller's problem?
One would think the bank would have to somehow be involved in it, right?
Or you can simply do an assumption. You can take over those payments, or you can do what I talk about a lot, which is called subject to. So I take over the mortgage subject to the existing loan. So I keep the loan in place, but I take and put the deed in my name. And what do I do with the property? I turn around and rent it out. So I'm leveraging existing debt, right, at 2%, 3%, and then I go turn around and rent it, Airbnb it, corporate rental, whatever my exit strategy may be.
Okay, so in that case, that wouldn't be a fix and flip.
Nope. That would be option 3. So option 1 is wholesale the contract. Option 2, still kind of in line with option 1. There's got to be enough equity for me to take it down myself, right? Go get a hard money loan. Again, talking to a listener that's never done this before, it's daunting to think, shit, I got to go fix and flip a house. Where am I going to get the money? Even at our level, right? We have a ton of cash. We do a ton of deals. We don't even use our own money to fix and flip properties. Still, to this day, I purchase the house with hard money.
Right.
I renovate the house with private money.
Got it.
Okay. So private money lender comes in. They give me 20, 30 for the renovation. I'm in that deal, $0. My wife puts it on the market. I flip that house. No money out of my pocket.
And why do you do that? So is this because you want to do it with many, many houses and you don't have enough capital to...
No, it goes back to REI, replace expenses with income. So if let's say we just did a deal, we made $125,000 in January, okay? I can take that $125,000 net that we just made on a fix and flip and reinvest that into my fix and flip business. Or JB, I can take that $125,000 and go buy another title company. So what I would rather do is
you see a better uses for the capital.
And the reality is when you go and fix and flip a property, let's say $300,000 price point, you go get a lender such as, you probably have loaned money to people multiple times, private lenders, hard money lenders, whatever. The total cost of that on a fix and flip is like $4,000 or $5,000. So if I'm making $30,000 to $50,000 myself in my pocket, wouldn't it be just perfectly fine to give some lender $4,000 on the deal for me to not have any exposure capital wise? Then my capital is over here working on buying a new title company or building up a virtual assistant business or whatever it may be.
Okay. What interest do they charge the hard money? 15%?
15% is kind of, if you're brand new, you're going to be at 15 to 18%.
And how many points up front?
No points in Arizona.
Okay.
If somebody charges me points in Arizona, I know they're from California.
Got it. Okay.
It's a California thing, is that they'll charge you a point, maybe 2 up front, and then they'll charge you their interest, right? So for us in Arizona, we pay 0 points.
Okay.
And the lender will typically, when you have a good relationship with them, it's 10% interest on your flip.
Got it.
And I can get 100% financing on the purchase. So let's say I contract with the seller at 210.
Right.
My lender will give me not just 210, but they'll actually give me 210 plus my closing costs. So they'll bring $213,000 to the closing table.
Got it.
I literally bought that house with no money out of my pocket.
Got it.
Now, JB, how do I go fix and flip that property? Now I don't have any money for renovation. Well,
private lender you go to.
Private lender.
Right.
Daddy Warbucks or people that come to us. We have nurses, doctors, engineers, all these people go, I need a place to place my money.
Okay.
Right. And we pay them because they're in second position now, right? We have a first position loan. This is getting into the weeds, everybody.
No, you have the hard money lenders in first position.
Boom. And then I got a second loan.
Private person's in second position. Right?
So if you're in second position, JB, wouldn't you want a higher interest rate?
I mean, it depends on what the first position. Yeah, it would, but in other words, it seems to me like there's enough equity to secure everybody here, right?
Yes, there is, right? Especially on a fix and flip. So second position lender typically gets 12 to 14%.
Okay.
No points.
Got it.
Okay. And then we take that money, we go and fix and flip, sell it on the market. My wife is our realtor, so she lists the property for $1,000. So she gets $1,000 and we save money. And I'm into the property, no money out of my pocket. Meanwhile, my capital goes and gets built out somewhere else.
Right.
Whether it's buying Bitcoin or doing whatever the hell you want, you let your capital go work somewhere else.
Okay. And is that like a hard and fast rule that always you're not putting any capital in? Or are there some people that say, I don't really want to give away money to the hard lenders always. I'd like to have my own pool of...
Yes.
Is anyone doing that?
A lot of people. In fact, I just got a text from my bookkeeper, Tony. She says, hey, your lender's supposed to wire $35,000 on a deal. They haven't. Can I just take it out of one of the company accounts? I go, sure. Right. There's timing things where, just use our money. It's no big deal.
Got it.
But there's other people that are very risk adverse and they also don't want to borrow money from people, right? Borrowing money from people is an icky word. And so they'll go, again, it's a personality type.
Sure.
I don't want that. And so they'll go and try and fund all these fix and flips themselves, which works, but it stunts your growth. Bro. So, are you the guy that wants to go fast and scale, or do you want to go slow and never have any risk?
All right. So now what step are we at now?
So let's go back to this. So we talked about
step 1, find the house. Step 2, right? Solve the problem.
Figure out what the problem is.
Right.
Step 3 is, which category can I move the seller into? Is it a cash transaction because there's enough equity? But what if there's not enough equity?
Right.
What if the total retail value on this house is $300,000 and the seller owes $290,000?
Right.
Wholesaler can't solve that problem.
Sure.
That's where a guy like me comes in. Okay. So I utilize creative finance, whether it's taking over their existing mortgage, giving them a little bit of cash and letting them move on. And I took over the debt.
So you took over $290,000 of debt on a property that's worth only $300,000.
Right.
So you're doing that because you believe the house is going to appreciate, or you can rent it out. What are you thinking?
Always cash flow. right? You never base anything on equity. I have a saying, equity comes, equity goes, but the cash will always flow.
Right.
Even back in 2008, when you talk to the guys that got their asses obliterated, it's because they were taking over. So the type of investing I do is called subject to investing, right?
Okay.
I'm buying something subject to an existing loan. There was guys that got beat to, like, they got the piss beat out of them in 2008. Why? It's because they were taking over adjustable rate mortgages. So in 2008, 2009, rates go up, they no longer cash flow. So I'm taking over fixed 2%, 3% rates, right? And this works with anything. It works with mobile homes all the way up to, I just bought a $3 million home with no credit, no credentials. Credentials is like, I have to have a W-2. Right? When you go get a loan, they're like, show me your W-2, show me your tax returns.
Right.
How long's your job history? Where's your cash coming from?
Right.
The last 130 properties that we've bought didn't use a single ounce of credit or credentials.
Because you're not borrowing from the bank.
No,
Right.
No bank is involved. Either the seller is creating a note for us, right, in a seller finance situation, or B, we're just taking over an existing note.
Got it.
Right? So if a seller owes $290,
Doesn't the bank have to approve you assuming in a mortgage?
not even close. No.
So the
And
seller,
we're not assuming a mortgage. This is where it gets really tricky. You can assume mortgages. I don't assume mortgages. The seller, this is where it gets tricky. Seller's name stays on the mortgage.
Right. So they're still on the hook, though.
They're still on the hook.
Okay.
Okay. They're still on the hook. So we protect
But
them.
you're going to make the payments, though. You say the pitch is you're going to be on the loan, but I'm going to make the payments.
Right.
And if I don't make the payments, you get the property back. Basically.
Right. There you go. So what we do is we'll write like a deed in lieu of foreclosure. And let's say that I get abducted by aliens.
Right.
I'm no longer even on the planet.
Right.
What happens to that house?
It goes back to the seller, right?
Right. And here's a couple of benefits. And I tell sellers, I go, let me tell you something. If the property, let's say I default or I get abducted by aliens, what happens? And they go, I don't know. That's a great question. I go, it's the best thing that could happen to you. Because now I've caught up your late payments.
Right. And you got the house back.
I've
right?
cleaned up
You
the
want me to
property.
default, sure. I get it.
Right. And now the house is amortized and I put some cash in your pocket. Okay. Now you get the house back.
So where are we in the steps?
So we're on step 3.
Okay.
Have I determined how I can solve that seller's
Okay, so
problem?
let's say you can.
Yeah.
Can you always, or most percentage?
I have never ran into a seller that we can't solve the problem. It comes down to 2 things, though. It comes down to timing and consistently following up.
Okay.
Okay, because sometimes you'll run into a seller who says, I need to move to grandma's house.
Right.
But grandma doesn't have an extra room for me for 2 months. Okay, well, that's a timeline issue. I got to consistently follow up with that seller because guess who else is following up with that seller?
Other people. Yeah.
Other people.
Sure.
Right? So that's where people fail in this business is that they call the seller one time
Sure.
and they stop. And they go, oh, the seller is going to call me back.
Right.
I just straight out tell the seller, I go, look, I'm a sales guy, so I'm going to follow up with you, right? Full transparency. I'm a sales guy. Whether you want me to follow up with you, I'm going to. So let's just put a time frame, 3 weeks. Great. I'll call you in 2 weeks and 6 days, right? So you just let them know you're going to continue to follow up with them and that you're here to solve their problem.
All right. So at what point now? So I'm still trying to figure out what is it that is stopping average people from doing this. Where's step 4 is what? Where you actually convince them to sell, or
step 4 is you work out an agreement.
Structure an agreement.
You structure an agreement. You put together a contract and you go open escrow.
And step 5?
Step 5 is you have your exit strategy.
So you exit, you flip it, or you rent it out, or
yeah.
Airbnb it. Right?
My primary thing right now is Airbnb, right? Because it requires less headaches with tenants and all that kind of stuff, and your cash flow is way higher. Okay. But
and you have a management company that manages the property for you.
Right. There's properties that I'll buy. Like I just bought one in Dallas. The seller sold it to us on seller finance. He says, I have a specific number and nobody can come to. I go, I'll give you that number if you give me 2% interest and you create a note for 30 years. Seller does that. I give him $5,000 for $500,000. I think it was about $500,000. Noah, my Airbnb manager, flies in, sets up the house, sends me a picture of him naked in the hot tub and says, hey, house is set up. Let's go. And then I get a check every month. That's it. That's all there is to it. I don't have to deal with the furniture setup. I don't have to deal with the Airbnb account. Somebody else does all that.
There's something about this that's making people look at it and say, wow, I understand it works for you and for you, but I just don't think it works. Like, what is this? Something that's making people believe it doesn't work for them. I've seen it happen, as I said, firsthand.
It's interesting. So a couple of years back, people constantly call me a go-giver. Okay. So what I did a couple of years back is I would just go on my Instagram and go, who wants to go on a ride along? I'll take you in the field. I'll show you how to do this. I'll go to an appointment with you. You can go see my attorney. You can go see my title company. You can meet my private lender. I'll show you every little thing. And what I found is out of 100 people that I did that with for over a course of about 2 years, like 4% of them were successful.
Successful,
and I did it for free. I did all this for free.
Successful why? They didn't
taking action.
Didn't follow through.
Zero.
Didn't take action.
Zero.
So is it really at the end of the day comes back to the inner game mindset? They just don't believe in themselves. They don't, they essentially train themselves, condition themselves into mediocrity, and they're just destined for paychecks the rest of their life.
I think it comes down to this. So when you were selling meat, for example, when you got trained, did they just send you out in the field, or did you shadow somebody for a couple of days?
I'm not a good example because I was a natural born salesman.
Right.
So I got some idiot took me out for a day and then he sucked and didn't sell anything and then I went out and broke the records. But that's a rare thing. It's just that's not I think what you're driving at is that people that are not trained properly go out, they get paralyzed, don't know what to do, and they drop out.
Or what they do is they go and consume all this data. Okay. They consume all the data and then they have this amazing notebook with like all the right answers in it, but they've still never spoken to a seller before. So it comes down to this. Find somebody in your local market. They're on Instagram. They're in Facebook groups. They're everywhere. Okay. For me, I don't call myself a coach. I'm not a coach. I am building a community. So we build a community. So if you come in and you go DM me on Instagram and you go, I need help in Charlotte. I go, oh yeah, I got 5 people in Charlotte. It'll help you out. No problem. What you have is you have local geographical boots on the ground that will show you the actual ropes.
Sure.
I think just as humans, even in this digital world, the thing that really helps is having that local support that will take your ass out and show you what it feels like, smells like, sounds like.
I think a lot of it comes down, like you brought up one really good point, that initial reference. You're like, oh my God, it's possible, right? So I'll tell you, my initial reference was not even in the meat business. It was earlier. It was in 16 and a half years old. I went down to the local beach, right? And people were bitching and moaning because it's a long walk back.
Long Island or where?
Jones Beach in Long Island. It was a long walk back to the concession stand. I'm like, I wonder what happened if I went and, got some ice cream.
I already know what the hell you're doing. This is genius.
Right? I'll go down, I'll sell for $1 a piece. The next morning I woke up, I went down to the local Good Humor place, right, with a styrofoam cooler. I'll tell you, you weren't even born yet. How about that? It's 1978.
This is genius.
Right?
I love this.
I go down with one cooler, costed me $22 back then. I sold it in an hour. I made $120 in 1 hour in 1978, right? That was more than my parents made in like their whole lives, right? In terms of, if you annualize it out. And in that moment, in that day, I was never the same again. That was what started me on the path to who I am. Before that, I was a fucking lazy kid. I was very good in school, but didn't want to study. And then it was like an aha moment. Like it was like it reordered my entire belief system. It's like, so if I just work my ass off and walk around blanket to blanket, and then next day I went back with 4 cools and made $500, about $2,000 today's dollars, right? And the first summer I made $26,000, which is like $100,000 today, right? And I will tell you that everything that flowed from that happened, like it was that day. Now, here's the interesting thing. 4 friends of mine, I took them down to the beach with me.
Oh, this is good. I know where this is going. 3 of them,
though, would just like sell 1 cooler and stop. They were okay, I'll make some money, it's more than I make, and they would stop. Only 1 of them would actually work all day like I did. So there's something about human nature, right? Number one, where like there's such a crucial thing for these rude experiences. So what you're saying is true. But I think having someone that literally takes you out and drags you, it's the idea of someone can get you over the spot of self-belief.
Right.
Like there's a lack of self-belief, right?
Yeah.
So like people always say, people have a fear of failure. I said, that's true, but I think more than failure, people don't believe they'll succeed. Like I'm sure when you go out there, you wake up in the morning, get out of bed, you're like, you don't say, well, if I really work hard today, I'm probably not going to succeed. You're like, no, if I put in the hours, I know I might have 1 bad day or 2 bad days, but I know eventually I'm going to succeed, right?
Honestly, it's not. It's so far past that. The thought of me not succeeding has not even been on my mind for years.
Right. So you take action. You say, well, if I do the work, I get the result, right?
But there has been times, right? When I was a contractor, for example, I was a contractor for 10 years. And I was watching all these other guys do it. And I go, oh, it's got to be really hard. Where do you get the money from? Where do you do this? Where do you do that? And I was put in a really tough situation. I had a guy that owed me $1 million. Okay, I was a contractor doing his work. And what would happen is I would go do 100,000 of work and he'd pay me 97 grand. Okay, then 3 months later, I'd go do $100,000 of work. He'd pay me 81 grand.
Right.
And over the course of 3 years, all of a sudden, this guy owes me $700,000.
Right.
And I'm like, shit. Okay. All right. Anyway, this guy comes to me, he says, hey, I need $200,000 more so I can finish these houses. I'll sell them. I'll get you paid back the whole $1 million. So what do? I go sell a couple rental properties, right? Because I was a real estate investor and a contractor, but I was just doing buy and hold. And what happened is I go help this guy out. He owes me $1 million. I find out that he had private loans on all these houses and there was no room left for me. He files bankruptcy on me, right? I get a letter. Literally, my daughter's born. Next day, I get a letter in the mail.
Right.
I filed bankruptcy. You're third in line out of 48 people that just lost $16 million, right? So what happened is I'm like, dude, I'm never working for anybody else again. It took that big of an event for me to jump into it, right? It took that big of an event for somebody to kick me in the ass. And that was the best thing that happened to me because finally I was like, dude, I'm never working for another person as long as I live. And I'm going to go just do what I've already been doing. And then I found out the contracting was the hardest part of this entire process. Right. Everything else is cake.
Why shouldn't someone go into this? Like what is there a type of person that you said, this is not for you?
No, because even my partner, so I have a business partner, his name's Cody Barton. Okay. Cody could not work himself out of a wet paper bag. Right. When I first met him, actually Steve Trang, the gentleman you had on the show a couple of days ago, Steve had me on his show a couple of years ago. Cody, my partner, sees me on this and goes, dude, this guy can close a deal. I need help. I can't close a deal. But you know what he could do? Generate leads.
Good opener.
Bro, just set the appointments and let me get on the phone, right? And if somebody just did that for you back in the day, you didn't have to cold call and you just...
Right.
So what I did is there's guys that are not meant or built for it quite yet, or maybe they're not ready for that phase in their life, right? There's so many amazing supporting roles in this type of business. Cody makes half of all the money out of our business, and he never talks to sellers. He never talks to private lenders. He never talks to anybody.
What's the fair amount of money you say someone could make in their first year doing this?
Okay,
from a dead start.
Let's look at a couple of avatars, right? Because I see a couple. I usually see about 5 of the same avatar. Avatar number 1 is a young kid, okay, 16 to 21, knows that they don't want to go to college, doesn't have any money to get started, and they go, I'm going to go on YouTube and I'm going to figure out how to make money. Right? There's an avatar right there. That avatar has no money. So what they got to do is they got to go, like I said, like Batch Driven, the app, right? Go download that app. You can get started for free and you can start calling sellers. I would say that avatar with very little experience could probably easily make $60,000 to $100,000 in their first year. That's me being very conservative,
right?
Because if I tell you what really is possible, people go, "That's not possible," right? So there's that avatar. Then there's the avatar of the 9-to-5er, the person that doesn't have any time, or at least they think they don't, right? The people that go to work at 9, they get home at 5, their kids are climbing all over them.
Second source of income for them.
Second source of income. It's the same thing. If you can spend Saturday, Sunday finding properties, helping sellers find, their pain. How do I solve your pain, right? Always comes down to pain, and helping them move on to the next chapter of their life. You getting paid an assignment fee on wholesale, or you buying cash flowing properties like we do. You could probably make $80,000 to $100,000 a year if you're a little bit more of an adult and you have had a little bit more experience with talking to people.
Okay.
Right? Now, there's another avatar. The avatar is a sales guy that's been a car salesman. Right? And a lot of guys that have been on your show, they were car salesmen. They jump, and they were, and amazingly. You take a guy like Chris. There's a guy named Chris that was on your show.
The Shark.
Chris the Shark, yeah. Car sales guy. That guy makes so much effing money, and in his first year made a ton of money. So if you already have experience in sales, which is what you are the king of, you can jump into real estate and dominate, and make easily $200,000-$300,000 in your first year, easily.
Okay. And how high could that go over time?
So
what's the real cap of this, you think?
The real cap is your personality. Okay. Do you want to have a lot of employees? Do you want to have a big shop? Do you want to have tons of things going on, like your shop back in New York? Like how many stinking employees did you have?
Right. 3,000.
Right. So do you really want to grow it that big? That's a personality type.
Right.
And at that point,
I guess my point is like, what's the certain, like every business is different,
right,
you know, like some businesses are meant to scale, right? Other businesses just like, there's a point of diminishing returns. Like it's like
wholesale is one of those.
It's like easy to make $1 million a year and live a great life, but you're better off kind of capping in $1 million and doing what you're doing, investing in other businesses.
Yeah. So I'll be really transparent with you.
Sure.
So in my wholesale operation, because we're generating leads, we either put them in the bucket of assigning the contract, we put them in a bucket of fixing and flipping, or we put them in the bucket of buying the house subject to or seller finance, and we keep those long term.
Sure.
Okay. Those are our 3 buckets. So sellers come through these 5 steps we talked about, and they're only going into one of those 3 buckets. That's it. Bucket number 1 in my wholesale operation, we're doing about 12 contracts a month. Okay. The average contract has an assignment of about $15,000. Okay. So if I'm making about $160,000 to $180,000 a month in my business, that requires me at my scaled operation maybe 2 hours a week.
Right.
Right.
Because you have expenses against that too.
Right. So out of that 180,
net on that, right?
180, our cost to run that operation is about $40,000 to $50,000.
Okay.
Then my partners and I take a split.
Got it.
Okay. So let's say
50,000 profit for you.
I probably take home every month on the wholesale operation about $40,000 to $60,000 depending on the month. Okay.
All right.
Then in my fix and flip operation, it's similar. We don't want to have 25 crews. We don't want to have all this stuff. So we average about 5 to 6 flips a month.
Got it.
The average flip right now, because it is somewhat competitive, makes about $35,000 to $40,000 a month net. So again, we're at like somewhere around the 150 mark after some expenses, some employees. And I have a girl named Anna that runs my construction. She makes her bonuses. I take home probably another $60,000 a month from that business.
Got it.
Okay. Now, my buy and hold business is where my real wealth is built, because now I've got hundreds of properties that we've taken down through subject to or seller finance that are now cash flowing like crazy, right? Cash flow. That is an infinitely scalable model because I have less employees involved with that. So for me, I'm at a phase now where I'm like, I want more of those. So right now, my take home on that is probably another $60,000.
Got it.
Right. So if you're looking at that,
but you're building long-term wealth over time if those properties appreciate, right?
Right. And even if they don't appreciate, let's say they don't appreciate, they stay stagnant or they even lose money. What's cool is that my tenants, my Airbnb tenants, are paying down all my mortgages for me. So really, I am making money in my sleep.
Got it.
Right. So other people are busy wholesaling.
What happened during the pandemic with Airbnb? Did it hurt you then? Or?
So for 30 days, we were shitting our pants.
Right.
Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? But now I've got traveling nurses and people really realize that they can work anywhere. Right? They can do a podcast, right? Poolside at their freaking mansion in Beverly Hills, right? They can do whatever they want, wherever they want. So now we have professionals traveling all over the country saying, man, I'm a sales guy for this. I'm a sales guy for that. I'm going to go live in an Airbnb for 3 months. So our Airbnbs, even through the summer in Phoenix, are booked out all the way through 4 or 5 months.
Got it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So for you, I like your model, right? So are you looking to expand by, building a community of people that essentially that you train, you mentor, and then they go out? I think the biggest issue with your business is the lack of barrier to entry. So it's almost like, and I think it's what's his name? I think Steve said, like, he's constantly creating competitors himself. Like he trains someone, they become his competitor, right? Yeah. Is that one of the things that stops you from scaling?
It's tough, man. I just made a post on my Instagram about this, is that when you hire an acquisition person, right? Somebody that manages these leads through that process.
You're training a future competitor.
Bro.
Yeah.
Because that personality type is an acquisition guy, is red personality like you, red personality like me. They're going to go dominate. And so you are hiring somebody that is going to be your competition. So what we've done to alleviate that is we have no more, and I feel bad for anybody that doesn't like this, but I have no more American employees. I've outsourced. There's a company we outsource to, vahub.com, and vahub.com hires all of our people, onboards all of our people. I've never met any of my employees. We have we have hundreds.
Got it.
So now, can they come and compete with me from the Philippines?
Yeah.
It's going to be a really hard time.
Right.
Going to be a really hard time. And they primarily focus on cold calling and texting those sellers, generating leads. And now I don't have to worry about somebody stealing my business.
What's the best piece of advice that you can give someone that wants to get into this industry?
Go find somebody that's doing it. And here's the challenge. We all see this. Everybody's selling a course. Everybody's selling a course. Go find somebody that's selling a course that is actually doing the business. right? I mean, would you advise somebody to go learn stock trading?
Right, from a guy who never really actually
No.
did it. That's very common though in the world.
I know. And we run into it too. I'll get people that DM me and they go, I got a question about so-and-so.
Right.
I'm like, where'd you learn that?
Yeah.
So more important is this, as I tell people, there's 3 steps to getting in this business, okay? Now, I gave you the 5-step process that you asked for, but here's the first 3 steps you need to do right now. Number 1, join a community.
Right.
That could be free, right? Local real estate investor group. It could be a Facebook group. I have a Facebook group. It's completely free. And 30,000 people from all over the country just work deals together. And they say, hey guys, I'm going to go drive for dollars, or hey, I'm going to go knock doors, or hey, I'm cold calling. Let's go do it together. Squatting up is the first step. Nobody can do this shit alone.
Got it.
Nobody can, because you either get demoralized, something bad happens, your wife tells you you ain't shit, whatever it is, you need a comrade. You need somebody, a brother in arms, right? Or a sister in arms. So step 1, go join a community. Step 2, bring value to that community. Everything is about value. Everything's about value, right?
And what are the easy ways for someone to bring value that's a novice?
Perfect. Okay. So let's say I have no experience. How can I bring value to a guy like me or a guy like Steve or some of the other guests you've had on your show? Well, if I'm doing fix and flips, don't you think I need somebody to stop by from time to time, take photos or do whatever? You could be my best friend and I will teach you everything I know if you would go to my projects and alleviate some of those steps. Do you need any experience to do that?
Right.
Hell no. What you need to do is find your God-given talents using your fingers or basic, things that you have access to, and provide value to somebody you want to learn from.
Like it. How do people get in touch with you? What is the easiest way?
Instagram.
What's the
Pace Morby.
Pace, just at Pace Morby?
Yeah, at Pace Morby. We have a TV show coming out pretty soon, which is pretty cool.
Channel?
A&E.
A&E?
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
What's it called?
They have a working title, so we've already started filming, but the title will change. The working title is called Flipping Arizona.
Okay.
So what I would do is, if you want to get in touch with me, I've got my LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff. Just go to pace360.com, pace360.com. You guys can text me. You can do whatever. I don't have anything to sell you. I have a community. If you want access to the community, great. But if you need help, go to a free Facebook group. Go to my free Facebook group. I'm happy to help in any way we can.
I love it. All right, guys, Pace Morby. I love Bobby. I really think you're a good guy. I've met a lot of the people in your industry. You strike me as being one of the good eggs in the industry.
Thank you.
I like what you're saying. Everything you said makes sense. The vertical integration stuff, I don't always agree, but it's not a huge disagreement. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good, but I love your approach to what you're doing. And I'm sure you're going to be very successful, even more so in the future. All right, so guys, check him out. It's got my blessing. I like it. All right, and wait for the next episode of The Wolf's Den. Share this with your friends. Take care.